蒙面财经朋友们好，这一期呢是一期英文节目。那发上来的目的呢是想为我们的英文频道做一个推广宣传。那如果大家觉得节目还不错啊，请分享给您身边的英语世界的朋友。那我们后续呢会推出一些专门针对英语观众的节目。那希望朋友们帮忙转发推广这个频道。这个频道的网址呢我会放在标题说明以及评论区的置顶位置。那感谢大家的支持。对了，我们这个英文节目的美女主播啊，叫田露，声音非常好听啊，英语呢也比我好太多。那希望大家在英文频道呢多多支持她。
Hi, Mass Finance friends. Before we start with today's episode, I want to give a big shout out to our translation team. Well, thank you, Alvin, Dee, Jiahao, Bing, Jiayue for making this episode happen. And you guys are fun to work with. We will try our best to continue improving, and thank you for your support. Well, today we're going to talk about the newly released PPI and CPI data for May, and the unsurprisingly massive scale of money printing. Well, for example, the amount of aggregated financing and the money supply M2. And so what do those data tell us? And before taking you through the analysis, let me first state a few conclusions here. Money printing and monetary stimulating policy are becoming less effective and unable to fight against the increasingly powerful rules of the market. And the Chinese economy is moving towards deflation. And even deeper deflation is a foregone conclusion. Neither the stock market or the real estate market can serve as a safe haven. All right, well, let's go back to the data from May and take a look at the trend together. Here, we're looking at the CPI data from May, and we can see that on the basis of 3.3 in March, the rate of increase continues to fall to 2.4%. As explained by the National Bureau of Statistics, out of the year-on-year increase of 2.4% here, food prices accounted for the bulk and then contributed 2.15%. Well, let's take a look at another figure here. Within the food section of the CPI components, the price levels of fresh vegetables, eggs, and fresh fruits has fallen sharply year on year, with only pork price remaining high. It can't be said that China's current CPI level is entirely boosted by the price of pork. If pork is removed, the CPI may already have a negative year-on-year growth. Well, speaking of this, I would like to mention that many Chinese analysts and economists believe that after the CPI declines, the central bank is able to let go of a large dose of easing, which is totally incongruous. Whether to lose China's monetary policy has not been determined by the CPI level for a long time. The loosening of China's monetary policy has only two policy considerations. One is that the entire social capital chain shall not break, and there are no credit crisis event like in 2013, or to make it simple, is that as long as there's no systematic risk. The other consideration is employment, and there is no large-scale spread of unemployment. The Prime Minister's theory of the night market economy is an expedient measure given the increasing unemployment rate despite the large amount of monetary easing. Let's take a look at this graph. At the end of last year and beginning of this year, the central bank continued to cut the reserve requirement, even facing high CPI without any hesitation. So everyone should understand that the CPI can only reflect the general inflation condition of the whole society and will not become the basis for policy formulation by the central bank, nor will it hold back the loosening monetary policy. Okay, well, let's look at the PPI data from May. And we can clearly see that PPI dropped again from 3.1% to 3.7%. For those who didn't understand the concept of PPI, well, the CPI stands for Consumer Price Index. Is a weighted average of the prices of a basket of commercial goods and services. Well, the PPI stands for Product Price Index. On the other hand, measures the average change in price, mainly on terminal products, such as product manufactured by industrial enterprises. And it is split into means of production and means of livelihood. Well, let's look at this picture. We can see that the PPI decreased 3.7%, and that is because the means of production has decreased in price, which was classified and analyzed by the Statistical Bureau. Well, let's look at the following data. The price of oil and gas extraction industry has decreased by 57.6% and increased 6.2 percentage point. Price of petroleum, coal, and other fuel processing industry has decreased by 24.4% and increased 4.6 percentage point. The price of a chemical manufacturing industry has decreased by 9.2% and increased 0.9 percentage point. And the price of coal mining and processing industry has decreased by 8.0%, which is increased 0.7 percentage point. We can see that the data from upstream industry seems pretty weak. That is because Chinese state-owned business has occupied the upstream industry, and it has a strong position in this traditional industry, such as oil, natural gas, extractive industry, steel, coal, cement, and chemical. Within those private companies, they have no chance to compete. For this who has entered the market, basically all has strong background. Do you guys remember what we've shown in our Chinese version of mass finance in the past about the state-owned business operation status between January to April? The net profit of central state-owned businesses has increased 63.6%, and the local state-owned business were even worse. They lost 23.7 billion RMB in return. Well, now you can see that is because of the sharp decline on PPI. And the state-owned businesses are closely related to those industries. So once the PPI started dropping, the state-owned business will start suffering. We're talking about this. I remember that in October 2019, one of my friends asked me if the economy was as tough as 2015. Well, my friend worked in this upstream industry related to the real estate market. So back in 2015, all the upstream industry related to real estate were in recession, with the company bearing losses across the entire industry. Well, let's take a look at how bad the situation was in 2015. The entire steel industry has losses over 100 billion in RMB in 2015. The price of steel was even lower than the price of a cabbage of the same unit. And coal industry was in trouble as well, with sharp decline in both sales volume and price. Another upstream industry is cement. So in 2015, 35% firms in the cement industry reported losses. Net profit for the entire industry decreases by 57.9% year over year. Petrochemical industry suffered in 2015 as well. In fact, the price of the petrochemical industry has been dropping 20 months in a row. Now we already know that with the price increase, destock and supply side reform in 2016, this traditional industry has revived. The policies stimulated demand by leveraging up household debt and reduced supply by shuffling and eliminating many private enterprises. Post-2016 period was a new booming for these traditional industries. The steel rebar was called gold bar. Some steel enterprises even used a pile of cash to pay their employees' bonuses. Well, suddenly, the state-owned enterprise in this traditional industry welcomed the new booming period. Well, who knew that 4 years later, as we're in 2020, the effect of 5 priority tests on the supply side gradually diminished? Here's a real quick side note for those who aren't familiar with the 5 priority. So the 5 priority tests are cutting over capacity, reducing excess inventory, deleveraging, lowering costs, and strengthening areas of weakness. As the traditional industry returned to the 2015 dilemma, can we have another round of price increase, destock, and supply side reform to fix the issue? Well, let's compare today's situation with what it was in 2015. So many factors changed, and we may not be able to apply the same strategy again. Well, first question, will price increase and destock policy still work? So in 2015, household savings set at a high level after 20 to 30 years of economic growth. In my opinion, 2015 was the best time window for China's economy to take a break. Many years of rapid economic growth has created problems such as pollution, high debt level, overheating asset price. China may need a little break and reform at this point. Well, however, as the economy worsened in 2015, the government implemented the price increase and destock policy, which increased the financial leverage for households and saved local government and state-owned enterprises. So sometimes I'm thinking maybe it is an ideological or philosophical question rather than an economic question to decide which part of the economy should a nation save. All right, well, let's get back to the comparison. First difference, household savings sets at a lower level today. It is more difficult to bring another round of price increase and destock. Secondly, the global economic environment has changed a lot. Well, back in 2015, there was no trade war, tax ban, and the unprecedented pandemic. China's trade surplus of 2015 was at a historical high. In 2015, even though the real estate market was in downturn, the global demand was robust. Due to low commodity price such as oil and iron ore, China gained advantage as the world's factory because end product pricing didn't drop or dropped less as opposed to commodity price. China's trade surplus increased a lot in 2015 as a result. But today's situation is different. Although China still maintains a large trade surplus due to faster decline in import than export, the global trade environment has changed a lot. Globally, there are countries like Vietnam and India eyeing on replacing China as the world factory. Well, domestically, many foreign enterprises are moving out of China. With the escalating tension between China and the United States, the global economic environment would not be as friendly as it was in 2015. It is much more difficult to keep large trade surplus in today's situation. Okay, the last point I would like to share is that the monetary and fiscal stimulus policies are coming to a dead end and diminishing marginal utility. We can see that aggregate private financing will amount to 3.19 trillion yuan in May and continue to reach a new record high again. So from January to May in this year, aggregate private financing reaches to a new record every month, as well as China's money supply M2 increased by 11% year over year, which is also up to 210 trillion. So in Chinese, we call printing money water release. The more water the central bank releases, the higher the deflation. So we're at the point where the market is almost getting flooded, but we haven't seen too much difference in the stock market, real estate market, or the consumer good price level. Well, in fact, that the CPI and the PPI are still trending downward, and the currency deflation trend has become more and more intense as well. The low-income population are having hard time to find a job. And that is why you see the Chinese government is encouraging the citizen to start what we call the local night markets business. Let's take a look at those two pictures. Well, the first one is the trend of the CPI and PPI from 2000 till now. And take a closer look at the red PPI curve. Then you can see the downward trend of PPI from 2011 to end of 2015. During the year of 16 and 17, due to the factor of raising prices of a destock and restructuring the supply side, there was a pretty good upward trend curve, as you can see here. It seemed like the future traders had a pretty good income during that period of time. So not sure if everyone noticed it began to go down in 2018, which is different from the fluency wave of decline in 2011 and 2012. There are many twists and turns in the decline after 2018. The reason why the wave of after 2018 is not very smooth is because the supply side structural reform. So once the prices of products in traditional industries fall, companies inside the industry are going to join forces and restrict product price, which has formed trust and has strengthened control over prices. Well, last, I'm going to show you the CPI during the Great Depression in 1929. The CPI declined 10%, which means the price of many products reference to basic needs fell beyond recognition. All right, well, let's summarize what we have talked about. We shared the status of CPI and PPI in May, which indicates deflation in China becomes more and more obvious. Maybe we'll see the situation like 2015 when PPI year on year fell by -4% or -5%. The traditional industry will face a crisis like 2015. But the time is different, and China's internal and external environment has changed significantly. So with that being said, we will have to be very cautious about investing in the second half of the year. Well, this is it for today. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.